Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sammasambuddhassa. Good morning to everyone. Brothers and sisters, I'm happy to be in this gathering after some long time, and to be present in this place, for which the previous speakers have mentioned the importance of this place. For me personally, I have numerous memories associated with this place. That's why I force myself to be with you this morning, in spite of a number of hindrances and odds. I lived in Sarnath for 30 years, from 1971 till 2001. And during that period, every year in the winter, except 1-2 years, I have the great opportunity to listen to the Kishinji's talks. Invariably, he used to give 3 or 4 talks during his stay in Rajghat. And also, I have the opportunity to have small group dialogues, which is called Dialogues with the Buddhists. There are 10-15 Buddhist scholars in privacy with Krishnji, having long period dialogues, and which were very enlightening and helps for in-depth understanding of Buddha's teaching, as well as to comprehend what K is talking about in the 21st century in a different language, but the same content what Buddha have taught 2,500 years ago. Krishnamurti study centers, schools, foundations all over the India used to have a gathering each year, and this time this gathering happened in Rajghat, and it is a good fortune for me to visit here after 24 years and refresh the old memories, and also to see many old friends. Therefore, I am grateful the organizers for inviting me and give this opportunity to me to be with you. The theme of the present gathering, Meeting Life, an inquiry into the fragmented self. this is a very big world, and I don't know how I can deliver a kind of introductory talk in this subject, because the word inquiry and that also into the fragmented self. We are completely conditioned to see, to look, and to inquire outwardly. And this inquiry or these questions are not able to direct to the inner side, because our thought process, the conditioned mind, is not have the capacity to look within, because our sensory organs have been looking out, and the thought or the mind operating through those organs are always directed to outside. And very rightly mentioned about the self, the fragmented self. Each one has taken for granted that there is a unfragmented, inherent, naturally by its own self, existence of a solid self. Without any examination, we have taken something on which we are stuck, on which we are holding, that is the self, the ego, the on searching you will not able to find such solid inherent self, but still our mind always project or designate something which is independent of everything. There is something self. We have a name, we have a designation or something, so on and so forth. If some other person calls that person a Devadat or Yagadat, the listener of this name reacts very firmly, someone is calling me. The me, which is independent of everything, but does exist. Self and the other are all interrelatedly arising and interrelatedly designated by thought. But we never try to find out whether there is an entity existing inherently or by its own nature, which is called self or the other or the person. we taking for granted whatever the conditioned thought has projected, that's taking as by its own inherently exist as an entity. Self is actually minority of one. Only one person thinks I, me, or the self. Or the rest of humanity looks to that entity as the other, someone else. Self also looks to all the entire living creature, the humanity, as others. The self is only exist a one entity, one person or one self. But when we begin to search where is the self, where is the I, where is the me, you will not able to pinpoint the entity which is called as self. The body is not self, we call it my body. The mind is not the self, we also call it my mind, I thought. The thinker and the honor of the mind always put somewhere else. My house, my parents, my family. You also put me or the my, the I, different from everything. As a person, we have a combination of body, mind, speech, and the body is my body, the mind is my mind, and the speech is my voice. And where is the me? By this kind of analytical search, you will not able to find the me, which can be recognized, identified as a person. In spite of that, the conditioned mind always grasping a very solid entity of the ego, the me, the I, as it does exist apart from the body, mind, speech, to which we designate as a person. So by this kind of analytical examination, you will not able to find. Then the question arises, that means, does I do not exist? Not at all. And I interdependently arising, designated or projected by mind, by thought, or by behavior, we shall have to consider an individual who comes from previous birth to this life, who goes from this life to the next life. To identify this entity, the entire Indian philosophical or religious traditions are divided into two groups, Atmavadin or Niratmavadin. Except Charvak and Buddhist, two traditions, all the rest of the Indian traditions are belonging to Atmavadin. Because a self need to be established, and to establish a self apart from the Atma, there is no another self. So therefore, the majority of the traditions, including the Jainism, Jainism is belonging to Anishwaravadin. They do not believe a creator like Buddhists, but still they believe into the Atma. How to define Atma, or how to define an interdependently arising individual, rising self? This is a very difficult for us to be a Christian. We need not engage into these debates. What we need to understand is who I am. What is myself? The self is the same as my thought produced or originated. In English language we call it ego. That ego is the self, or it exists, or there is something different from that ego. No finding an absolute inherently by its own entity existence of self is able to find when we make an inquiry, who I am, where is the me. You will not able to pinpoint. This is the taking away all the usual entities on which we are designating the self, the body, the mind, the speech, and all the rest of things. Separating all these things, you will not able to find inherently existence of self. In spite of that, an existence of self. That is the, I think, the beginning of inquiry into fragmented self. There are many Buddhist traditions to find out interdependent designated self. There are 4 different ways of looking at it, but all of them commonly agree that independent, inherently existence of self does not exist. That is only the grasping to such self is the cause of all negative mind, negative emotions, and that is the root cause of binding us into ignorance, and thereby we are not able to get freedom from the bondage of karam and kleshas. So therefore, This is a basic question asking by every religious tradition to find out what is the self, different from what we are at this moment through ignorance and concept of a independent self. That is the root cause of all misgivings and misunderstandings. To doing such inquiry for that self, we need to unconditioned mind, which have capacity to observe the things unconditionally. The conditioned mind usually not able to make a real inquiry. What is real inquiry? Now I may say the self is the subject of inquiry, and the inquiry mind that is in the realm of thought is the instrument of the inquiry. And then applying that process of inquiry, our condition is that someone who is doing the inquiry is the independent from the subject of inquiry and the process of inquiry. That is again a problem, illusion, not able to do the real inquiry. An inquiry and an observation without the observer, without the inquirer, will be able to do that as an ordinary person at this point of time. We look into the process of inquiry. Always the conditioned thought is taking for granted that there is an inquirer, there is an observer. Eliminating the observer and the inquirer, we are not able to do the process of inquiry. Now, what is the way? There's no possibility of making a positive or imperfect way to inquire into within. K is many times used to ask number of questions repeatedly. Among them, I would mention two his questions. One question he quite often asks is, "Are you learning?" And the other question he usually asks is, "Are you flowering?" The learning is in reality a process of inquiry. If I use the Buddhist terminology for convenience sake of communication, the Buddhist method used to divide the process of learning into three stages. The Shrutamaya Gyan, the Chintanmaya Gyan, and the Bhavanamaya Gyan. To understanding, to learning, and to flowering, they must go through three stages. The first stage is Shrutimaya Gyan. That means a knowledge which is coming from listening or reading or accumulating the information. You might listening from your teacher, you might reading from a book, or you may accumulate from many different sources a kind of information. From that information, you have a kind of knowledge, the name, the definition, or the processes which knowledge which are come out of listening, Shruti. That knowledge is, in the Buddhist terminology, we call it borrowed knowledge. It's not self-knowledge. It is a knowledge borrowed from someone else through communication, through information. And that is not a real knowledge. That is acceptance, not knowing. Then that information is analyzed by one's own rational mind to examine the information, whether it is incorrect or correct, or it is partially correct and partially incorrect, or it is completely correct, which is knowable and realizable. So this kind of process is the real learning. Real learning means what you have achieved, an information, a borrowed knowledge, which puts through process of examination, and you find for yourself the conclusions, false, right, partially right, whatever it may be. So that is then your own knowledge, Chintanmaya Gyan. You have go through Chintan, examination, analyzation, through which you put the information through your own examination and analytical process. Then what is find for yourself is the Chintamaya Gyan. That is also within the category of knowledge, means within the thought realm. Otherwise, the knowledge acquiring from hearing, you think it, you know about it, is not knowing, but it is acceptance. In our own language, we can say it easily, jhana or mana. The teacher have taught something and you just accept it. That is only mana, not jhana. 90% of our knowledge is acceptance. Whatever is taught by the teacher, whatever is written in the book, without your own examination and understanding, you have accepted them. So this is applicable to every field. In the spiritual field, in the philosophical field, in science and technology. Technology may not be that applicable, but in science also, majority of the science principles, the students does not know through their own experiment, but someone has done the experiment and put it into the book, and the theories have been taught in the classes, and we just accept them. So mana is just a blind faith, and it does not have any value as knowing, as understanding. Then you put them through examination, through inquiry, and you find some right or wrong conclusions by yourself. Then it comes to the category of self-knowledge. You know about it, but you know about it through conceptual mind, that means thought. Then you meditate upon it. The meditation is in the realm of something not the usual unspiritual field process. The bhavana, the meditative mind goes with the rational and also concentration. Concentrative mind and analytical mind goes together. Then you will have something special way of seeing the things through perceive mind, perception. Then you will, today the usage of perception is also very corrupted. So here I am talking about the perceived mind is direct touch to the reality, to the subject. That is perception mind. So that is also the final stage of learning. K, asking, are you learning, does not mean you are listening or you are reading or you are accumulating the informations. He is asking, do you going through the process of learning by your own examination, by your own analytical mind and rational mind? And then he asks, are you flowering? Flowering means after awakening of your inner intelligence, then you perceive the subject of inquiry directly through your perceiving mind. So that is flowering. The flowers, the buds of flowers wrapped to flower, then there's no external condition or cause does not needed. By its own inner strength or energy, the flowers open, blossom beautifully. So similarly, when your rational mind is going through inquiry and examination, then you reach to the stage of bhavanamaya pragya, then there is only not gyan, then there is a pragya. So you are opening up see the reality, the nature, true nature of the subject of inquiry. So then you will be able to see it, your not conceiving mind, but the perceiving mind. That also called realization. Realization word is used for many other connotations as well, but in the spiritual process of inquiry, the realization means your knowledge of conceiving mind is converted into the perceiving mind, and then the subject of inquiry is before your perceiving mind, the direct seeing mind, not depending on any image or projected things, objects. So the mind and the subject meets together without interference of image and conceptions, constructed things. So that is the real way of inquiry. By this kind of inquiry, which is not completely controlled by a separate inquirer or learner or doer, observer, to eliminating the doer and the observer and the inquirer, only a process of inquiry is a work by its own, without referring to, without depending to, or without controlled by an entity which is controlling, initiating, or guiding the process of the learning or inquiry. Then only you might be able to reach to the real self, the real existence of self, which is in the nature of interdependently arising. Interdependently arising, what Buddha is taught throughout his lifetime as a cure of the Buddhist philosophical tenets. Nothing is nothing can be found as an independent entity when you search analytically to any existence. Any existence, the existence is only appear to a unconditioned mind, appear to that unconditioned mind as interdependently arising. For example, we designate some entity as big. We designate some entity as small. How the big and small exist? It is in relation to something else. The small exists in relation to the big. If there is no big, then you cannot designate, you cannot project anything as small. Small is a comparison with the bigger things, and the bigger thing is the dependency on which the small entity is depend. And similarly, the bigger entity is depend on the smaller entity. In that comparison, there are also cause and conditions depending on, there's something little at gross level. The sprout is depending on the seed, and the seed is considered as seed because of this potential to be a sprout. And this kind of the fire and the smoke, the cause and the result, this also interdependently. So everything is putting together some related and in relation to arising, that is the interdependently arising. In the Buddhist terminology, it's very famous. Partitya sama utpad. Partitya sama utpad, one to another, some relation, comparison, cause and effect, this kind of relationship. Through this kind of relationship, something is arising apparently. Arising apparently is accepted by unconditional, unpolluted mind, recognize that as it is. That is the real existence. If we understand the self and the other, the individual and the rest of the humanity, how they do exist is to be seen through as a nature of interdependently arising. That means as soon as the dependency or relationship is ceased, the existence of the entities also disappear. But there are certain continued things such as subtle consciousness. Subtle consciousness is also interdependently arising, but that interdependently arising always remain as a continuity, because the cause has undeniable, undiminishable potential to give the effect. So there is such as consciousness, it never comes to an end. Each moment it is arising interdependently, and it is resonated by unconditioned mind, and that goes through. So that's why the majority of the Indian tradition, whether accepting Atma or do not accepting independent existence of Atma, but continuum of consciousness, continuum of the great natural grounds which can never come to an end. There are many things which does not have the continuum of the entity, but there are many things which do go to the continuum. So having said that, what is purpose of inquiring into the fragmented self. Misunderstanding of self, misconception of the self is the root cause of all misery, all negative things. Grossly, we may say a person misconceive the real, inherently independent existence of a self that divides that self from the rest of the others. And this division is the cause of all negative emotions, such as greed, selfishness, indifference to the others, hate, anger, jealousy, violence. All these things are come out of the misconception of the no interdependent self-existence. At gross level also, if we understand the interdependency of the family members to each other, humanity to each other, countries to each other, today the entire world is a globalized world, and we are very heavily interdependent and interconnected to all the countries and our nations. And due to that, whatever conflict, whatever violence, whatever destruction to do to the others is ultimately effort to oneself. So that's very clear and very easy to understand. If we are able to understand the self is immensely depend right from its existence, its surviving, its wellness, its goodness, or its well-being, whatever is we are looking for is depending on largely to the entire world, and particularly countless beings, other beings, without which we cannot survive. Yesterday, I was listening to a beautiful talk, and the speaker mentions that 1 cup of tea to sip in the morning. Do you realize how many individuals have contributed to that 1 cup of tea? You look to the production of tea industry, tea gardens, how many people are working there, how many insects has been killed in the process. Then it comes to the factory to process, then packing, then transportation, then go to the shop and go the purchase by someone and making the tea at home and putting some sugar. And you look the sugar industry, how the sugar canes are growing, how many farmers have been involved in that process. And it is the transportation, it's the process in the shop, in the house, and also there's milk. And the milk is coming from some animal, and how this animal has been looked after by so many people. So therefore, even a small cup of tea thousands and thousands of individuals are being contributing to realize that article. So therefore, we must feel grateful to all of them. So the interdependence and independent existence, this misconception is the root cause of all kind of um, conflicts. The idea itself is divisive. So that divisive idea can be eliminated if you are able to see the real nature of the self. The real nature of the self is interdependently arising, and it can exist as long as the interdependency and the interrelatedness is undisturbed. The well-being of self, the interrelatedness cannot be seized, but interrelatedness is disturbed, then the well-being is not possible for any individual. Today, the entire world, we can see so many challenges and problems are coming ahead. Environmental degradation, global warming, climate change, wars and violences, terrorism, small conflicts within the families and within the society, and which are always causing unhappiness, the gap between haves and have-nots, the exploitation, the corruption, all kind of things each day we are facing. All these we are not able to understand the way in which we are arising and we are living, and what are the conditions are for our good living, for our meeting the life properly. So that all comes back to the understanding of self and the relationship with others. So this is very important, not only for spiritual journey, even for a cohesive society and peaceful world. We need to know our interdependency and our real way of coming into being and way of our existence. This appears to be extremely necessary. When you understand the interdependently arising nature of the self, then that self cannot be figmented. Figmentation is unknowing of the nature of the arising and existence. That is the cause. So all kind of divisive principles or divisive concepts or looking way of looking, that makes the conflict. Conflict is the cause of all kind of misery and unhappiness. To resolve a conflict, big or small, the real way is to understand each other's viewpoint, position, and desire of something to be achieved. For that, the way of looking to the things, the viewpoint, the difference of viewpoint need to be analyzed and clarified so that different viewpoints can brought to a common viewpoint, everyone acceptable viewpoint. For that purpose, we need to understand the nature of self. By understanding the nature of self, it will lead to the understanding of the others are not different from the self. Self and others, equilibrium, equalness is the basic cause of peace and harmony that can be achieved, and we should try to, particularly the right way of thinkers should look for one's own benefit and for the benefit of all sentient beings, if not all sentient beings, all humanity at an equal level. The equality, undivided member of a larger global or universal living beings, living society, we need to understand the reality of the self and undivisibleness of the factual realm or the truth realm. The no difference between all sentient beings. Entire sentient being, there are three basic points which make them equal. The first basic point is each sentient being like happiness, comfort, dislike uncomfort and misery, suffering. There's no differentiation between any sentient being. And similarly, each one has the right. In the modernity, people talk about rights very well, very common. Each sentient being have the right to achieve happiness, comfort, and pleasure. And they have right to avoid unhappiness, misery, and other things. And thirdly, each one has the potential. Each sentient being has the potential to flower in totality, to achieve the peaceful and happiness, and to dispel the unhappiness and unwanted things. So therefore, the purpose of a gathering is, as you mentioned in the announcement, meeting life, an inquiry into the fragmented self. The inquiries and learning are number of different ways. The collective inquiry, collective learning is more powerful than singular or individual learning or inquiry. Because in the collectiveness, they are sharing of energy, they are sharing of realization and wisdom. So purpose of gathering is to share everyone's experience, realization and wisdom with other. And that can only be possible through communication. That's why right from the ancient time, the seers and philosophers encouraged the disciples in the process of learning, communication, debate, dialogue, discussion, and advising each other. Krishnamurti also adopted the basic medium way to share his wisdom to his followers, his talk and dialogue. So therefore, in the coming 3 days, you will have a sharing of wisdom and an intimate dialogue. Intimate dialogue is also sometimes difficult unless and until you do away with the fragmented self, a different entity from the other selves. So to dismantle the boundary and the divisions, then in small groups, having very meaningful dialogue and collective learning can be achieved. I think that is the only purpose of having the gatherings each year. So this is a good tradition, and each participant must participate fully. And for the participating fully, the misconception of inherently independent, truly existence of a separate self should be denied, and a interdependent self, how we can very well to connect, to depend, to rely upon the entirety of the humanity or entirety of sentient beings. And by that way, I think you can achieve the intended objective of the gathering. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your enlightening talk. We have time for taking up 2 questions. For the question answers, if somebody would like to ask anything to Rinpoche, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, I want to just interested in knowing why the self gets fragmented. I mean, why humanity got fragmented in the first place? How did division come? Has Krishna ji or Buddha spoken about the causation of or the origin of this fragmentation? What is the root of this?
As I mentioned before, the root cause of this fragmentation within and without, outside, both are come from the misconception of independent inherent existence of self, which does not exist in reality. The self is constructed from interdependent cause and conditions. If you see the interdependence of the self, then you cannot separate yourself from the rest of the being. Then there's no cause of division. As everyone loves oneself, then everyone able to love to every self, every individual living being become equal.
Continue. What about energy? Is energy part of that consciousness, or is energy?
Your question is quite subtle. Yes, I would say energy always goes with the consciousness. Without energy, consciousness cannot move. Consciousness is the nature of mind, and the energy is nature of moving force. So all the gross level, subtle level, and very subtle level, energy and consciousness are like a vehicle and a driver, goes together.
So this too, inquiry, when you inquire, does the energy become quiescent? Is that what?
You make an inquiry, and I think the energy become more forceful, because the inquiry can only be conducted with help of the energy, because the inquiry is a process of mental exercise. The mental exercise is depend on the vehicle of the mind, the energy. So it, as much as your inquiry progresses, the vehicle of the inquiry, the energy is also increase.
Sir, is awareness also falling and rising?
Pardon?
Is awareness also falling and rising?
Falling in?
And rising.
Falling and rise.
Yeah.
Oh. That question is a little tricky. Awareness are two different kinds. Awareness at the level of Chintamay Gyan, and awareness at the level of Bhavanamay Gyan. Awareness in the level of realization that can rise, that cannot be fall. But awareness at the level of the Chintamay Gyan then can arise, but there is a possibility of falling if you are not continue to, with that awareness, to put into the Bhavanamay Gyan. I think that's all.
Sir, one question is more. How can one remain all the time in observation? Because as I feel, observer and observed are the two entities which is causes all the conflict, confusion.
Sorry, I could not follow your question. Can you repeat?
Yes, sir. Sir, how can one remain most of the time in observation only? Because as I feel, the observer and observed are the two entities which causes always conflict, confusion.
Yes, that causes conflict and confusion. So one shall have to make, I don't know, one shall have to make efforts to find out ways how to do the observation without the interference of the observer. As I mentioned in my earlier talk also, this is easy to talk, but very difficult to do it in practically. So once you are able to observe without interference of the observer, then of course you can avoid the confusion. Until that, you need to have in our Buddhist terminology, we call it Anusmrit and Sampargyana. Anusmrit means remembering, just to watchdog when you are observed, whether the observer is interfering or not, there should be a watchdog. And that watchdog should be sensitive enough as and when the observer interferes. And at that moment, the sampragyana, the positive force, should take the challenge of the observer. And by that way, you can slowly but gradually can do away with the observer.
This is the last question for this question and answer round. It's one of the members from the audience. Sir, I'm reading out the question to you. When in the end, interdependent arising of self is seen to be nothing, does it mean that whole of the cosmos arose out of nothing? Shall I repeat the question?
Please.
When in the end, interdependent arising of self is seen to be nothing, does it mean that whole of the cosmos arose out of nothing?
In short, I would say yes. Out of nothing is the space which gives chance to arise in everything. If there is something, then there cannot be arising anything. So it may be in the world, it may be a little unacceptable, but in a real sense, nothing is the basis of everything.